Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Christian LeBourgeois. He is the current free agent and formerly VP of IT at RKD Group. Welcome, Christian.
How y'all doing today? Thank you, Pete.
Thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Sure. I'm an IT guy, 25 years in the industry. Kind of got my start in the contracting world, where basically the vendor of multiple major businesses, Dell, at-home cable, and starting up contracts there. Moved into more of the telecommunications world because I was spending a lot of time in the cable support world. And so telecommunications, kind of with Exo Communications, worked as a networking, working on the business T1 side, and kind of ventured into the world of help desk management, especially working for a company called Ameripath. We mainly a pathology type company, but then was purchased by Quest Diagnostics. So you may have heard that one. And so at Quest Diagnostics, once we were purchased, it was primarily a lot of help desk management. I'd say that's probably where I really got my start into management. All the previous jobs was mainly just help desk supervising, getting a feel for managing people. But in 2005, that's when I started the world of truly just trying to develop people, develop that talent that I had on my team. From there, I kind of went out of the health world and into the marketing world, and to a company called Stratmark. They primarily serviced nonprofit organizations at the time. And my job was primarily as the systems administrator. And as we went through a couple of years, we kind of purchased by another company, went through some mergers and acquisitions, became Robbins Kirsten Direct. And throughout this entire time, I'm spinning up infrastructure, kind of totally understanding best practices, keeping everything safe, doing security checks and whatnot. However, that is where I really got my push into owning all of IT, building the entire infrastructure and securing it. At that point, it's about 2014 that we started to really pick up pace, and my career started to take more of a leadership, but also working with other stakeholders, working with the executive leadership, and explaining exactly how it is that I secure everything. So I went into the world of CISSP studying. That was a bear of a test. However, I came out the other end a whole lot more knowledgeable about security. And from that point, it was really understanding the full suite of security, building the security infrastructure that we had, but also acquiring other businesses, mergers and acquisitions, and bringing them up to speed to all of our standards, and SOC auditing and whatnot. So it's been quite a road. I know that's a long answer to a 25-year here, but primarily telecommunications and starting up contracts all the way into now really leadership and infrastructure and all of the emerging technologies.
Very cool. So obviously a variety of industries there. Have you noticed that hiring and managing and mentoring people has varied at all among different industries, or say between IT and security?
I would say, yeah, but it also might be a little bit more of the amount of years that have been in between there. Every 5 years, the technology landscape just changes. So being able to mentor someone, it would be catastrophic if I was trying to mentor someone remotely 20 years ago. Now, not catastrophic, I'd make it, but there's definitely something to be said about now the suite of different applications that we have to make remote management easier, right? So it is challenging to connect with people, though. I think when it comes to being a mentor, you have to have some level of connection. It's not just giving them answers or just, pointing them in the right direction, but really understanding who they are and what you want to instill upon them. Also something that you would want the company to benefit from as well, right? You've got to make sure that you train them up to be really useful in their role.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and a lot of people cite challenges in building a cohesive team culture in a remote environment where you're not seeing somebody every day or even every week. A lot of the companies that I haven't had many corporate jobs, I guess, but the one company that I did that was remote first, often our auditors would cite the fact that they kind of felt stranded out on an island by themselves. And I think you can do remote management of people correctly and remote team building, but it's certainly more challenging. Like you said, there's a emotional connection that you have with people when you actually say shake their hand or interact with them in person and see those micro expressions and body language and all those things that you don't necessarily get in even a video call. What about the talent gap more broadly as we talk about it in IT and security? Do you think that that's a real thing right now?
Well, I think you just touched upon it just a little bit there. One of the benefits of, the in-house work, not being remote was identifying the talent in other departments. You go, especially in IT, every day knowing everyone, you know what I mean? And then you go into a remote environment where suddenly your head's down and you're not around the people, you know what I mean? So that is a huge challenge because then you're kind of separating yourself from who's out there, not only who you can help, but who you can lean on from other departments who have talents that you don't know about.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, and visibility is so important. I often talk about that from a candidate's perspective that, you really need to be visible to hiring managers to be employable in a market where there's thousands of people competing for a singular job. I mean, you've kind of, I guess, been on both sides of that, having been on the hiring side as well as the job seeker side. Is there anything that you're learning now on the job seeking side that maybe you didn't anticipate when you were on the other side of the fence, so to speak?
All of it. No, not really. But it certainly is a challenge. But it also depends on exactly how you've managed the past maybe 5-10 years of your work life. I think one of the things that was missing in mine was definitely honing and getting my connections built up. LinkedIn, getting your connections, sure, but getting your true connections, the people that you would reach out to all the time, right? Just kind of, or at least touch base with and keep the conversation going. I think a lot of people in your previous jobs or who knew you only know one side of you. And if they don't keep up with you, then you have a connection, but that connection doesn't know what you do. So I think that is part of it that really, while I was expecting it, I did not expect it. I spent the past several years working, and then suddenly you realize, wow, I have not paid attention to my connection pool.
Yeah. Well, and one thing about human relationships is they take a lot of nurturing. It's a time intensive process. You can't have a deep relationship with somebody if you're not, I don't know if I want to say top of mind, but if you're not regularly interacting with somebody. And how practical is it really to maintain 100 different professional connections over the course of the long term if each requires, regular check-ins and such? Is there any shortcut to that, or do you focus on the few people that you really just click with and then the rest are kind of, outside of that inner circle, but still at arm's length to where you could tap them, if you had a question or something?
That's a great question. But I'd say maybe even just always being available for those in need, probably. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen from a person who is attempting to find a position is the connection pool I have. There's a lot of people who have kind of come to my aid, people who have, while I haven't talked to them in a while, they've provided a lot of help, and that's really helpful. That's really great.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point too, that, if you're constantly of service, it's not something you really need to think about to maintain those relationships. It's just something that's a natural outgrowth of your being willing to help people, because there's always somebody that needs help, and if you make it a point to seek that out, or at least be open to that, that good karma essentially that you're generating in the short term will, at some point possibly pay off in the long term. Not always. Like, you don't want to look at it, I guess, as a
No.
transaction, which I tend to do just by nature, because I'm very sort of black and white, logically minded, to where, this cause happens to affect this effect, so I'm always looking at those cause and effect relationships. But I think with human relationships, you can't necessarily look at it that way. It has to be more, I don't know, qualitative, if
You're
that's the
right.
right way to put it.
No, you said it, and it also involves definitely finding those that you click with. I can't say that I'm going to sit here and really nurture the relationship of a boss that was not agreeable to work for, right? I find them to present a challenge that's good anyways, that you learn how to deal with a disagreeable person, but I'm not going to nurture that like I would be any of the other people that just really had my back and understood exactly how I clicked, because really you almost start completing the sentences of each other when you have a great back and forth. And those are definitely the people that I would probably, and then I do pay attention to probably first and foremost.
Yeah, well, and it made me think of something else. Like, if you have a genuine sense of curiosity about the people that you surround yourself with, as a natural consequence of your just clicking with them, quote unquote, that curiosity inevitably will lead to conversation, which, leads to enriched relationships. What do you, I guess when it comes to curiosity, I think that's an important part of hiring as well. Like, do you think that curiosity is something innate that people have, or can that be developed, especially in like a job or career context?
So I think there's different people that you try to hire for, and some of those people you want levels of curiosity, a mind that's constantly digging, moving forward. But there's also the people that you want to be kind of that rock, or that pillar, and those people might not want the extra. They want to check out at the end of the day as well, So I do say that I am looking for that curiosity when I'm hiring for roles that I need a person to sit down and make an effect, and be a self-starter, though. Somebody who has more of a responsibility and might be a little bit more seasoned. But at the same time, like I said, there's definitely a need for people who aren't necessarily curious. They just want to have a process. They want to follow it. They want to provide help to people, and they want to go home at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly see all sorts of different people, obviously, in my line of work in recruiting. And I find often that hiring managers are looking for that curious person, that quote unquote passionate person, that dynamic individual. I think that word is overused, but people aren't looking generally for that static person that just kind of plugs into a given process. They want people to improve on processes. But I certainly think that there is a place for those people that just, I don't want to call them clock watchers, but that want to do their work and go home at the end of the day. I think often, especially in the security field, there's a lot of pressure on people to always be, up with the latest vulnerabilities and keep up on all the latest technology. And now with AI, it's even more important to be always on top of things and on the bleeding edge. I sometimes wonder if there's going to be a place moving forward for the people that just want to put in their work and go home at the end of the day, or is it going to become a new necessity to be that curious person, to be employable in technology? What are your thoughts on that?
Gosh, I guess as long as there's a computer to talk to and a person that doesn't know how to talk to it, I think we're going to have a job at that point. But I do see the concern, though, because when you do have processes, and a person who is just relying on a process and to complete it, that is I'm not saying this can be taken over by AI, but I do believe that a lot of companies are assuming that it can be taken over by AI, especially even right now. So the answer is yes. There's a concern for people who just want to work and go home at the end of the day, I guess, to AI. But I think it's just a little bit more in the temporary, while the AI thing, I think the AI thing is going to have to trip some people up for people to learn their lesson. I think it's the same thing with all cloud. I think, back in early, maybe 2012, 14, you've got, we just got to move all to the cloud. And then suddenly, we got to move out of the cloud. We got to move all to India. We got to move out of India. And it becomes, I guess, more cyclical than anything. There's a technology that comes on. Everybody just thinks it's going to be saving the world. And when you put the process that a seasoned person who clocks in and clocks out, if you change that out for just AI, I think that companies are going to find themselves in a bit of hurt, because that seasoned person brings knowledge, and I think AI brings information.
Yeah, well, and there's a few threads to pull on there. I mean, it would seem to me that in the age of AI, that adaptability becomes more important than maybe it was in previous years. And I guess that's what I'm afraid of, is if people aren't very adaptable and they are accustomed to just following set processes and aren't used to changing processes or changing technology, something that's constantly evolving, is there going to be a place for that person? I think the bar is continuing to be raised across all technology roles. So, for instance, in GRC, the latest movement has been GRC engineering, where traditionally GRC folks could be very policy minded, and they're technical writers almost in a way, and they don't necessarily need to understand the technology on a deeper level. But that's changing now, where they're being expected to at least have basic coding knowledge, where 5-10 years ago that wouldn't have been the case. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess what are your thoughts on, like, I guess, in-demand skill sets right now? So in my experience, it's like super highly technical stuff. It's very niche things like OT security, where there's just not many people that have spent time on plant floors with these machines and the technology surrounding them. I guess, do you have a sense for like what the market's demanding right now?
In relation to what you were just talking about, as an example, say technology back in the 80s and the 90s, you've got the spreadsheet software that's causing all the accountants to freak out and think, oh my goodness, this is the end of accounting. I mean, how are we going to compete with a computer that can do calculations like that? But it didn't. It made accounting amazing, right? It gave them more skills. If you did have somebody that's like, well, I'm an absolute pro at, doing compounding interest, then that's something that Excel can do. But if you did not go into more, learn Excel, learn what it can do, and then suddenly you're an analyst, right? You're not just an accountant, but you're finance and analyzing things, and you're making yourself better. So I do believe that if there's a specific one skill set that could be threatened and that you do need to adapt. Say a person who creates logos all day long. In the 90s, 2000s, whatever, you make logos and you can just make a killing off of that. Nowadays, in the past year or two, you just go to Copilot, say, I want a logo. Well, you're not going to get the absolute best logo in the world, but you do get a logo you didn't have to pay for. So that is going to kill the profession of someone who only looks to creating logos.
Yeah, right. Good enough. Yeah, because I think a lot of companies are operating off of the good enough model. It's not, we want to get the top 10% of results. It's like, we'll get 80% of the way there and be all right, So it would seem to me that the only way that you could kind of remain relevant no matter what is to be in the top 10% of your field in any given thing, and or level up to a different skill set entirely. like you were saying, through the use of technology. So yeah, a great point. What about the human element, I guess, of hiring and managing people? I think we're always going to have a need for people. The question is, how many of them are we going to need, and in what capacities? But there's always going to be that human to human element. I guess, what has your management style been like, and how have you been able to retain and help people be successful?
It's always a challenge to retain, but it's something that I've been very proud of to do. I had like 7 or 8 years where I had 100% retention, and maybe a little bit of luck, and the company was doing really well as well. But I found a really amazing group of people and hired a really amazing group of people. So that was very fortunate. But regarding I apologize. I repeat it back again so I can just get it right here.
No worries. What are your tricks, I guess, for retention, being that you had so many concurrent years of no attrition? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's what it was. And, it really, talking about the human element of it is hopefully how I did it. And I'm constantly changing my mind. Like I feel like I reason myself into how to maintain and retain people, and then something new comes out of the woodworks, or a new type of personality. But I at this point feel that it is about, unless you're managing tens of people, you got 20 people, this might be a problem. But to know every single person's a fingerprint, they are an individual, and their drive is not only different from each other, it's different than who they represent themselves to their wives or husbands or whatever, right? They know a whole different side of that person. This person's a whole different person to me, so it truly is what drives them is what keeps them. And how can I show them that I am kind of on their team? Right? I don't know if it sounds simplistic, but it's not. It's really hard to do when you have so many different personality types. If you've got more than one person, then you've got a problem. I mean, I think my dad told me that a long time ago. If you've got more than one person, then you got a problem, because they're going to not get along at some point. You have to be able to manage that.
Well, and somebody's motivators may even change over time too. So not just between people, but even within the same individual from week to week. Major life experiences or life circumstances change, family grows. I think the only way you can really stay on top of that and be adaptable, to go back to that term, to all of that is be close enough to your people, have developed a level of trust early on in the process, which of hiring somebody in the first place. I think trust starts being built at the very beginning, from the very first time that you meet somebody, setting expectations, being transparent. That's a big one for me. It's one of my core values, is to give people enough information to trust you, basically. Yeah. What are your thoughts on, I guess, transparency and expectation setting? Did those ever come up in your management?
Well, totally, definitely. And, I want to actually speak to real quick the mention of the fact that it changes over the course of their motivations change. That changes even like weekly or monthly. And it's one of those things that I've been very attentive to my staff is, what are they going through in their life? I mean, sometimes things are requiring more of them and they can't give more to me. Sometimes they're in a real, some past in their family, right? And the only way that they can help themselves is by putting in more hours into work. Sometimes that helps people get back into and so that really does change. It's going to change from month to month, and things are going to happen, right? Murphy's Law, something's going to happen. And if you're prepared for it, you can be with that person throughout that. You don't have to get too deep into it. We're not a family, right? It's just, you have to, definitely they're individuals. I think it just goes back to they're individuals, and you have to know who they are. If you do, it's way easier to maintain and retain that talent.
Yeah, well, and to pick out something you said there, being prepared for it. I mean, there are some things that are a lot more difficult to prepare for, like, if you're not aware that an employee's family member is sick, maybe they're not sick and all of a sudden they pass away suddenly. That's not really something you can plan for, but I suppose in a way you can, to have sort of a blanket contingency plan for what happens in X scenario. And obviously, that's an important concept in IT and security, disaster recovery. Do you think that's sort of a policy level thing, or is that more of an individual management thing?
Individual, completely. I'd love to say that it's a policy thing, and I think in maybe other groups or maybe in other management area that might be for them, but for me, the people that I hire, it's definitely a personal thing. Like I said, everyone's a fingerprint, and that's how you're going to get your best reaction out of people. And
for sure,
as you had mentioned, the transparency. I think, as far as my management style, and you had asked me, transparency is concerned, it's a huge thing to me. I think one of the problems that managers get themselves into is, you can support the company and you can beat the drum, and that's great. But when your employees see you cheering on something, they're like, well, this doesn't make sense. And you're like, no, it's great. And then you're not being transparent with them about your concerns. You don't have to, it doesn't roll downhill, right? But you have to be able to address, hey, we might be in a little strained land. We might be in a little bit, this doesn't make sense. There is a higher view that some people have that I can't go into, right? And just hang in there. I'm going to be there to support you through it. And that's helped tremendously as well, is just being transparent with them that even I'm concerned, but I won't be concerned if I've got their support and they've got mine.
Oh, for sure. And almost kind of like the idea of being in the boat with your team and rowing with them. I think, often there's a sense that if you're not an effective manager, often you're kind of on a pedestal above the team, and that sort of distance is visible, I think, to the team members. But at the same time, you also have to walk that line where at the end of the day, you're their boss, and like you said, you're not a family. Like, how do you draw that distinction between, look, I need you to get this done, and yeah, I totally hear you, but this is, what we need to do, despite the fact that I'm on your same side.
Well, I don't even know if there's an answer for that, unless it's really just in the situation. Because I think at that point, you're measuring the amount of risk that you're getting into. And what is that responsibility of the person? Are we talking about a person that's just cranking out a couple of extra tickets and they just got to get the ticket number down? Or is it somebody who's going through a disaster recovery? I mean, if you go through something critical, hey, you might be dealing with 24 hours, maybe 48, that you're not sleeping. I would never tell anybody just deal with it. But at the same time, if it happens, it's part of at least my business. Being in infrastructure, security, you can't get away from it.
For sure. Well, it seems to me there are lots of judgment calls, that there's no blanket answer for things. And I think moving forward, that's going to continue to be where there's a need for humans, is where those judgment calls need to be made. But, not everybody has the same judgment making ability either. And I think often there's a lot of people that are disillusioned with, say, the pay of executives, because they don't understand the types of stakes that executives are dealing with in making every single decision. It's like the whole company's future rests on each one of these decisions. And that's a lot of pressure. And I think some people are better built to handle stress than others. I guess, have you ever encountered a situation where the team was super stressed out and you had to try and calm the waves a little bit?
Sure. Absolutely. I think that should be something that you have to do a lot. I think it ebbs and flows with maybe even the health of the company. I think a lot of people get in a situation where maybe the company's not doing too hot, and they can think about, well, all these CEOs or whatever are getting paid all this money. And that's one of the things that I do, is communicate with the executive group what is the concerns below me. And then conversely have to communicate to them what the concerns are from the executives in a way they can understand. as well as without giving up the farm, and then letting them understand, like, oh, no, we're buying a new company in a week. We what? Like, you can't say that. But at the same time, it has been, mergers and acquisitions. That's a tough thing. That is a very tough line to ride, is to let your staff know that everything's going to be okay while things don't seem like they're okay. But it's because we're acquiring a new company, and in a week they're about to get told. So it's that anxiety, managing that anxiety. But when it happens, if it's happened before and I brought them out on the other end, then they'll trust me, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting too that you're kind of the go-between in that scenario between two parties that don't necessarily see eye to eye. I kind of see myself that way, as essentially a middleman in recruiting between the hiring manager and the candidate. And in most cases and in most aspects, they have a common goal, and they're all moving in the same direction. But when it comes to, say, an offer negotiation, there's two competing interests there. The hiring manager has a budget to keep in mind, and then the candidate wants to maximize their salary. So sometimes it helps to have that person between the two parties to say, look, I understand your viewpoint, candidate. I understand your viewpoint, hiring manager. Here's how we come together. This is what both parties want. And here's the magic number that both of these parties will accept. Mm-hmm. And clearly communicating that. When I say, for instance, submit somebody's resume to a client, I give them one salary number. I just did a LinkedIn post about this. I give them one salary number. That's the salary number that person would accept an offer at, no more, or more, yes, but not less, Yeah. But often, despite your best efforts to expectation set, the offer will come in lower than that. And then the candidate will either hard negotiate or get insulted because, they said one number and they were offered lower than that. It's like, well, don't you value me enough to pay me my asking? And then me as the recruiter, I have to say, well, no, it's not really about that. They just have a budget to contend with, So there's a lot of these little negotiations that happen when people have competing priorities, I guess. What's speaking of recruiters, what's been your, relationship like with HR and recruiters?
It's been really good. In general, I think to speak to what you just said about people feeling insulted, I think that's a good line, right, where you talk about personal versus business, where to draw the line. And I, very early on, used to get pretty, not insulted, but as if my personality is being questioned if somebody, and then that's not it. It's not who I am as a person. It's just, this is business. And it took a long time to realize that part, but that is what it ends up being, is that it's a business and it's a back and forth. But if they come in low, hey, it's a business. You're going to have to understand you insulted somebody, and that's a horrible way to start the relationship, is by trying to whittle down somebody so low, right? Because I think there is an insulting number. But I think also, to what you were asking, how is my relationship with the HR, the recruiters? I think you have to have good recruiters. I think you have to have recruiters that are able to communicate that well, but also communicate it back to you what their requirements are. So people don't want to give people bad news. I get that. But hey, there's a number, right? There's a magic number. And there's one thing that's very important to me, is due compensation. I don't think anybody should be paid obnoxiously more than what they're worth. If you're worth an amount, you should be paid that amount,
Yeah. Well, and everybody has a different number that they're worth too. And that, I guess, gets to the idea of salary bands and pay transparency and stuff like that. Obviously a pretty contentious issue. I have a pretty unpopular take on that, in that I don't believe in full salary transparency, because I think it's a recipe for people getting upset at each other over differences in salary, when there's usually a difference in performance or experience or credentials. Like you said, no two employees are the same. So if no two employees are the same, should the salaries be the exact same for the same role, different experience? I don't know.
I've handled before that by creating multiple, and luckily the company I was with allowed multiple different levels of engineer, administrator, level 1, level 2, level 3, all the way to 5, and you associate it with how many years they have, right? And there's other ways to maybe quantify that extra experience that somebody has where people don't get all bent out of shape. Because I have been kind of transparent with pay before. I think it's important, but like you said, though, I think there's a cutoff for sure. Once you get too transparent, you got a lot of people, well, why, where's mine? Where's whatever? And too much information sometimes is not good, especially when it comes to people's compensation and how they provide for their families.
Yeah. Well, and understandably, it's an emotionally charged issue because, people do take it personally when somebody's told what they're worth. Professionally, they take it as a personal evaluation almost, which I guess that's just how we're wired as people. We often equate professional worth to, self-worth. I myself do that. I think anybody, especially who's especially career-minded, they tend to do that even more so than other folks. They put a lot of, maybe that's their driver for almost everything in their life is their career, and so a low salary offer could be essentially insulting the person themselves if you look at it a certain way. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's business, and I think it's all in how you communicate bad news, which I think so many recruiters are just simply not doing these days. And I think part of that is because recruiting management does not incentivize people to get back to people, to candidates, and to provide bad news, part of which is a liability thing, because if you provide feedback on somebody and they could take it the wrong way and then end up suing you. And, there's a reason the companies don't provide a ton of feedback. But I think the least that you can do as a recruiter or HR person is to let somebody know they haven't been selected for a role once they've interviewed. That's the job, or at least part of it.
Yeah, I recently interviewed for a position where I did receive feedback for it, and I was like, that is great. Anytime I can receive constructive criticism, I'll take it.
Yeah, well, it's so rare it stands out in your mind. And, if you're an employer and you want to develop a good employer brand over time, that's one of the best ways to do it, is just get back to people. You'd be surprised how many people will refer the right fit for a role despite the fact that they weren't the right fit. I've had that happen where somebody had such a good experience with me as a recruiter. They said, well, I really appreciate your transparency and let me know why I'm not a fit, but I actually have a friend who might be a fit. And I've made placements that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you had mentioned, just as far as motivators and what people, maybe all of their motivation is behind their salary, and I know it sounds odd, but there's a certain level of relationship aspect to it. There's a love language. I know that's weird too, but that you have to understand about the other person. And I just go back to, if you have 20, 30, 40 people to manage, that might be different. That's not what I'm talking about, and that can be extremely challenging. But when you've got 5, 10 people that directly report to you, you have the opportunity to know what that language is. To one person, a couple of people in my tenure, it's been all about the growth or the access to the technology, constantly moving. That was what was important to them. Decent enough compensation. And that is how I've always been. Decent enough compensation. Some people are like, I don't care if you congratulate me or if I learn anything, give me the max pay you can give me because I want to provide. And that's fine too. That's their love language. Other people want full work-life balance, whatever that looks like to them. That's what they want.
Yeah, well, and understanding that on the front end is so important before you get too far down the interview process. That's why I spend so much time in my screening calls on those motivators for making a move and digging past the surface and asking the follow-up questions, because I think often there's some stigma around certain motivators and people don't want to tell you what they actually are. So the recruiter needs to have the emotional intelligence to figure out when somebody's maybe not giving them the whole truth and dig past the surface a little bit. But I can tell you, somebody who's trained a couple of recruiters now, not everybody is wired that way to pick out the little inconsistencies or the hesitations, the little things that might point to somebody maybe not telling the whole truth. I guess that's why we have interrogators and psychologists and all that stuff. But
I mean, you're I guess you're never gonna be able to identify each person and what they are, but you can get a really good idea of the fit. I think the best that I could say it is just a fit. It's when you talk to someone, there is a fit to the position that you need. If you've got a nice team of people that can help mentor a more junior person, then you know with that person how they act, how they respond to things, and you can find that fit. Sometimes you need somebody to drop into a position and just go with everything they've got and what they do, and they need to be able to speak to the stakeholders. So then that's a fit, right? But usually from a personality standpoint, there's just always somebody who jives with you well, and I think that's what I always try to do, is find those people, because you can teach people technology. And if they want to learn, that's the most important thing, is that they are ready to, if they say they want to learn, they're going to be ready to learn. And then if you don't need to teach them how technically to do their job, that's great. But I would much rather teach somebody the technical aspects of it than try to mold them into a better person.
Yeah, I hear that so often. It's crazy. Well, and the analogy I was thinking of as you were talking about fit is basically the organization is like a not fully complete puzzle. And the person that you're hiring is a puzzle piece, and everybody has their own puzzle piece shape, and they slot into roles differently. Not everybody's going to be the direct shape match for every role. Mm-hmm. The challenge in recruiting is finding the person that is that fit. It's like I always say, there's a butt for every seat, right. And even if you don't have the most desirable position out there, there is somebody out there probably that would be thrilled with that role. It's just a matter of wading through the sea of applicants or people on LinkedIn to find the right person.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's 100%.
That's a great place to wrap up. Just one last question for you, Christian. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry that we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Oh, goodness. I get most of my information from seeing that stuff on LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn is a really good place to get all of the, what am I missing? How do I go about connecting better and refining myself? But I also think that LinkedIn seems to be more of an island. I think a lot of times I think recruiters aren't talking about the fact that the only people on LinkedIn might be the people that are just looking for jobs. I don't want to say that completely. I'm just saying, when you try to reach out to so many people that you worked with or work with and no one answers you, and then you just kind of, hey, shoot them a text. Hey, oh, sorry, I don't ever log into that. And it's not that I'm saying anything bad about LinkedIn. There's got to be, I guess, a better way for people who are working to get connected with the people who are not working.
Yeah, there's a whole world out there. And nowadays, I mean, there's Discord channels and subreddits and Slack channels, and there's so many of these micro communities. I wish somehow we could combine all of the micro communities with LinkedIn and with the people that aren't actively on all of these platforms. Because I'm sure there's a ton of security folks out there that I would love to recruit for jobs that I just have no way of reaching them. I mean, they're purposefully off the grid almost because they're security minded, So
there's always the how do I better or effectively communicate with the people that are hiring? LinkedIn is great and all, but do you go directly to their email address that you assume is their email address? Probably not, right? Oh, I assume it's first name dot last name at whatever. And they're like, oh, what did you sent me an email, but I never gave you my email, right? I don't know. There's certain faux pas that you could do. And some people are like, no, send that email. Yeah, first initial, last name. You'll get in there. It's just a numbers game. And, it's kind of like I was talking about relationships before. It's like you don't want it to be a numbers game sometimes with your career. And you don't want to, hey, you want to date? Hey, you want to date? Hey, you want to date? And then all of a sudden, no, I found somebody. Well, okay. You want it to be a little bit more natural. And I think that's what recruiters could be touching on a little bit more as ways to make it more personal, I guess.
Yeah,
Maybe
for sure.
companies too. I feel like maybe for the companies too, even make it more personal because it's horribly impersonal.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah, I think the hiring process should be more human than it is currently, and technology has only made it worse over the years. And I think if we want to go back to effective hiring, it requires less technology, more people, and process.
Mm-hmm.
So,
an IT person, I'm sorry to say that, but yes.
Well, great place to end. Christian, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
Right now, probably my website, it's just c-le-b.com. Just a little portfolio site that I have, but also provides kind of consulting information on what I do and how I do it.
Awesome. Well, we'll put the link in the description as well. So thanks for your time, and thanks everybody as well.
Thanks a bunch. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.